Welcome to the GRE test prep program brought to you by TrboTest. As you already know, I'm your instructor, Professor Konstantine, and we are on the verbal section, specifically the analytical writing section of the GRE. Now, the analytical writing section, as you already should know, only has one essay now. They used to have two, of course. They've removed the argument essay, so it makes it a little easier because now you only have one 30-minute essay. So for the analytical writing overview, we're going to look at key methods and strategies for writing your essay. We're going to look at the issue essay itself. Remember, the argument essay is gone, the issue essay is still in play. All right. Under the issue essay, we're going to look at the analysis of the issue task itself. We're going to look at understanding your audience, forms and structures. We're going to show you a sample or two. Look at the scoring system so you understand how they're actually scored. Then there's going to be some self-practice, right, for you to do. Then we're going to, in the separate video that follows this, we're going to look at a content review. And that we're going to look at the writing foundations for the essay. We're going to look at writing style for the essay, grammar, the mechanics, and then some writing style exercises. All right, under the overview for analytical writing, remember, it is now only one essay, as I was saying, and it deals with the issue essay. The argument essay has been removed. All right. Note, the essay does not contribute to your overall score, the 130 to 170 score for verbal. It does not figure into that. And obviously, it doesn't figure into the score for the quant section of this test. It is a separate score. It is scored 0 to 6, and it is a standalone score. So it's not calculated, it's not figured in. What does happen, though, is when your scores are sent to a university of your choice, they also send the essay you write with the score, the breakdown for the admissions committee. Some admissions committees read the essay. Other admissions committees don't care about the essay. What you need for a score, obviously a 4 or above would be the ideal scores. If you're going into a journalism program, you're probably going to want a 5. But any others, not that big of a deal. A 3 is not what you want to shoot for. But again, some schools don't even care about the essay section of the test. So don't lose any sleep over it. But whatever you do, don't just blow it off, because it is important that you do put the work in, just in case someone in the admissions committee does want to look and see how you write. And if you don't do anything, don't put any effort into it, it's certainly going to hurt you. If it comes down to 2 students who are trying to decide who's going to get the seat, and one student puts their heart into their essay and you don't, well, you can pretty much figure out you're not going to be the student that makes the cut. Also, if you're a foreign student, not a US or British student, the essay section tends to be looked at a little stronger to make sure you understand English so that you can read and write and understand concepts that are necessary. Okay. As the analytical writing portion of the GRE is not counted towards your score, remember we just talked about that. Many students dismiss the importance of it. Don't, all right? Not doing well in the analytical writing section could hurt your chances. We just talked about that. But I want you to remember that, like anything, do your best. Put in the best effort possible when you write this. If you're not concerned about your writing, then it's going to reflect, and we don't want to do that. At the same time, if you're a good writer, if you've written essays, of course, in secondary education, high school, and in college already at the university level for undergraduate, no big deal. This will be a breeze. This is not a technical piece of work. This is an essay, so relax, and I'll walk you through this step by step, and you'll do fine. As I said before, to answer this question, how much is enough? Well, it goes from 0 to 6 in half increments, 0.5 increments. A 4 or better is sufficient for almost any program, except, of course, like a journalism program, where you're expected to write, and they're going to judge you based on your writing style here. Otherwise, don't worry about it. What you can do, though, is go online, Google the school that you're going to go to, look at the program you're going to go into, and determine what their minimum score is or what their average score is for the analytical writing assessment. If you can't find that, call someone in that department, call the admissions committee, find out what they're looking for so you know whether or not it's going to be a big deal or if you've done well enough. All right. Here, we're looking at key methods and strategies. As I said, it's not overly complicated. If you're a good writer, you're shooing, no big deal. But just in case you're not, remember, you've already written essays to get your undergraduate degree. You probably wrote lots of essays in high school, and certainly one on the application to get into the undergraduate. And so you already know how to write. Nothing new here. All right. The issue essay is like any other 5-paragraph or so, 4 or 5 paragraph academic essay. This is not a dissertation. This is not a thesis that you have to defend. This is an essay. So don't overcomplicate it. All right. I have a couple of hints here for you that are very important for you to remember. The first hint is always pay attention to the specific instructions that are given with the prompt. Right? When you're writing an essay, they're going to give you a prompt or a passage or even a sentence, and then they're going to give you instructions. You have to follow those instructions. The instructions vary. I'm going to cover every instruction you could see, but that's not the point. The point is make sure that you read it and understand what they're asking you to do. Don't assume what they're asking you to do either. Make sure you know, because when you write the essay, it has to follow the instructions. Otherwise, they will deduct the points. Right? The second one is, back to that, just keep in mind for a moment, you can have a perfect essay. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed, your grammar is perfect, sentence structure is awesome, it flows well, but if you don't follow the instructions, you will never get higher than a 4. Okay? Keep that in mind. The second hint I have is no matter what the official rules say, longer is better when it comes to these essays because it tends to get a high score, or higher score, I should say. But with that said, remember that you only have 30 minutes from the time you start to see what the prompt is to the time you have to be finished, including writing and typing. You only have 30 minutes. That's not a lot of time. If it sounds like a lot of time, go ahead and write an email to someone. Write an email to yourself if you want, and answer some questions. Think how much you can accomplish in 30 minutes. Not very much. So don't push the limits on the length. All right. With an issue essay, remember, there's no right or wrong answer. All right. Whatever your position on the essay, that's fine. They don't care for right or wrong. You're not graded for right or wrong. You're not judged for right or wrong. It's only based on how well you can express your opinion on the particular issue. All right. What is your point of view? Do you convey that and get it across? That's what they're looking for, not whether they agree with your position. It doesn't matter. All right. Always, again, I can't stress it, keep in mind the instructions. Make sure you understand them. All right. Now, for example, here is a statement that you might see on the issue sentence. Okay. It is always best to look before you leap. All right. A handful of words put together to make a sentence. That is an actual GRE sentence. That would be on the essay. You have to decide, do you agree with it or do you disagree with it? So whatever the instructions tell us is what we have to do. Right? The instructions may instruct you to write a response in which you discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with that statement. And then you explain the reasons that you have that position. Again, it doesn't matter what your position is, as long as it follows the instructions. So let's look at that sentence again. It is always best to look before you leap. Now, before you decide on what position you're going to take, whether you agree or disagree with it, you have to determine what the statement means to you. All right. It may have a different meaning to you than it does to me. You may interpret those words differently. You may have heard them in a different context, and that's what you think of. So for our sake, we're just going to assume that the interpretation that you've come up with for this statement is that you should consider the potential consequences before you take any action. Okay? Regardless if you agree with that or disagree with it, that's what the interpretation has to be. So we're assuming that's your interpretation, but it needs to be based on your interpretation. So whatever you take, whether you agree or disagree, you have to supply proof or support to what your position is. Now, that proof or support doesn't have to be real. It just has to be believable when you write about it. And I'll cover that in a little bit more. So if you agree with that sentence, it is always best to look before you leap. You might recall some experience in the past where you or someone you know acted impulsively, acted recklessly, and they leaped before they looked. They didn't consider the consequences, and a negative outcome came, right? So that would be a good example. That would be something that would support your position and why this is a true statement. Conversely, if you disagree with that statement, you might be thinking about Lewis and Clark and thinking about how they came to the continent and they explored this continent without really knowing what they were going to get into. And they went places no one had actually gone and documented before. So all of a sudden, they're actually leaping long before they're looking. And it worked out quite well. So there's two different points of view there, but there's a third one too. And the third one is kind of unique, and you can have a little fun with it. And that's where you kind of agree, but kind of disagree. And that's okay too. So you make your point and then look at it a little differently and say, well, you know, while I agree you should look before you leap, there are times when you have to leap before you can look because we don't have the data. Right? So either way you go, and that's called a qualified agreement, right? And that's acceptable. It's easier and better if you have a yes or a no, agree or disagree, because it keeps it nice and clean. But that doesn't mean you have to. All right. Remember, you're not being judged on your position. You're being judged on how you present your position. All right. So always pick the side that you feel the strongest on. Right. If the prompt tells you to pick either disagree or agree, and you feel strongly about it, great, stick with that position. But sometimes the prompt will do just the opposite. Sometimes the prompt will tell you that you have to tell us your position and then disprove or discredit your position. So make sure you read the instructions before you make the choice. Okay. The issue essay, the instructions, okay, you will be given a brief quotation that states or implies a topic of general interest, okay, along with explicit instructions on how to respond to the topic. Your response will be evaluated according to how well you, one, respond to the specific instructions the task gives you, two, reflect on the complexity of the issue, three, organize and develop your thoughts, four, support your reasoning with relevant examples. Now, I can't stress this one enough. You need to support whatever your position is, even if it seems obvious to you that everybody should agree with you in your position. You need to support it. Now, as I said before, that doesn't mean that your examples and your evidence have to be real. You can make them up, right? If your position is to disprove something and you really can't think of it, whatever it is, you don't have the evidence available, make the evidence up. Make it sound believable, make it sound true, make it sound like it's facts. Even if you have to make something up like, according to a recent study conducted by the Maine Department of Education, blah, 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 blah. Okay. As long as you make it sound legitimate to support your position, it works for this essay. Number 5, express yourself in standard written English. Right? Many students want to write essays and they want to sound smarter than they perhaps are, or use bigger words than are necessary. I caution you against that. This essay on your test is going to be graded by a human being and by a computer. Both are looking for words that don't fit the context or the writing style, and they will take points off for that. So don't. Keep it very standard written English. Don't try to oversell your point. All right. The following is a comprehensive list of instructions that can accomplish a statement in an analysis of the issue task. Right. So we're going to cover every instruction that possibly could come up for you. A, write a response in which you discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with the statement and explain your reasoning for the position you take. In developing and supporting your position, you should consider ways in which the statement might or might not hold true and explain how these considerations shape your position. So they're asking you to do a lot here. They're not only asking you to agree or disagree with the statement, and explain, of course, you've got to explain your reasoning for taking that position, but then they ask you to do something else. They ask you to develop and support your position in such a way that you consider why the statement might be true or not true. All right. And then you've got to take the time to explain how these considerations shape your position. So they're really asking you to analyze what's going on. So don't just wing this, understand it. B, write a response in which you discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with the recommendation and explain your reasoning for the position you take. In developing and supporting your position, describe specific circumstances in which adopting the recommendation would or would not be advantageous and explain how these examples shaped your position. So as you can see here, again, you're asked to do a lot of things. You have to pick a side and agree or disagree, but then you have to explain the reasoning for why you're taking that agreement or disagreement. Then you have to develop and support your position and describe specific circumstances which adopting the recommendation would or would not be advantageous. So you've got to take a position, you've got to look at why it could be or might not be, and then explain with examples. So here you might have to make up some examples, but make sure they all tie together. The next one, write a response in which you discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with the claim. In developing and supporting your position, be sure to address the most compelling reason or example that could be used to challenge your position. All right, when you get into one of these questions, if you get a prompt like this with this instruction, you realize immediately that if I agree with something, I very strongly agree with the statement, but then they want me to go ahead and point out what facts and what evidence supports my position. And then they want me to go ahead and reverse it and point out why my position might be wrong. I've got to come up with compelling reasons or examples that could be used to challenge my position. Here you have to realize that if you take in the beginning, you take your position that you're adamant about, it may be difficult for you to challenge yourself. You may not think of any reasons you could challenge yourself. As far as you're concerned, your position is correct. So in this case, it's advisable for you to take the opposite position originally. Right? So if you agree, take the disagreement position, because you certainly have far more information, examples, and support to challenge that. Because remember, you really didn't disagree, you just took that position. So when you start writing about why your disagreement might be wrong, you've got plenty of ammunition. Right? Next one, write a response in which you discuss which view more closely aligns with your own position and explain your reasoning for the position you take. In developing and supporting your position, you should address both the views presented. All right. So whether you are positive or you're negative, it doesn't matter. Pick a side. Here they want you to pick the view that aligns with your position and address both. The view that aligns with you and the view that doesn't. The next one, write a response in which you discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with the claim and the reasons on which your position is based. Okay? So you want to support this on which the claim is based. You've got to come up with evidence that would make your position stronger, basically. All right. F here, which is the last prompt instruction you could see. Now remember, you're only going to have one of these. You're only going to have one statement or passage or sentence and one of these instructions. You won't see all of these, but you will see one of them. So you want to familiarize yourself with each one of these and how to address it. Let's look at this last one. Write a response in which you discuss your views on the policy and explain your reasoning for the position you take. In developing and supporting your position, you should consider the possible consequences of implementing the policy and explain how these consequences shape your position. This one you could have fun with if you got this instruction, because it allows you a lot of leeway to create a nice picture for the reader. All right, form and structure. Step one, the first thing you need to do is take the issue apart. You want to read the prompt, the issue, okay, whatever it is, the sentence, the passage, whatever they give you, and consider both sides of the argument. All right, but here's where it gets important to remember. Paraphrase. Paraphrase the issue in your own words. The reason you paraphrase is if you can paraphrase something, that means you understand it. If you can't paraphrase, then it means you don't understand it well enough. So you need to comprehend it and paraphrase it. Right? Consider the other side of the issue and put that in your words as well. So you look at both sides of the argument and paraphrase it. All right? That way you can understand it and you can dissect it. All right? So the first thing we do when we take an issue apart is we look at the point where we agree with it. Right? You may not take the position you agree. You may disagree, but you should come up with 2, 3, or 4 different reasons why this statement could be true or the statement could work, right? And put it down, all right? It doesn't matter if you're strong about it. Obviously, the weaker you are, it means you want to go with the other side, right? Which would be the disagreement side. And here you would write down the reason you disagree with the statement. Right? You're looking for your strongest point here, whether it's the agree side or the disagree side. Once you've outlined these, they don't have to be complete sentences. They can be abbreviated. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to worry about spelling if that's a consideration that you have to deal with. Just put it out there so you can see what the points are that you came up with. Step 2 is to select the point you will make. After you consider both sides of the issue, think of the reasons and examples for both sides and decide which side you want to support and the extent to which you agree with the stated position. All right. Stated differently, what they're saying is if you have a strong side, whether it's agree or disagree, whatever your strong side is, based on the points you came up with, you'll know which one you have the strongest examples, the strongest argument for. That's what you want to work on. That is the point you're going to make. So you're going to list your strongest point first, then your second strongest, then your third. All right. Don't worry about going past 3. You're not going to have enough time to put that in your essay. So focus on the strongest point, the point that you have the most to write about, the most to say, the one that you're invested in. Step 3 is to organize. You need to organize your thoughts. You should organize them on paper. They're going to give you scrap paper when you take this test, or they're going to give you small 8.5 by 11 whiteboards to write on with a dry erase marker. Either way, outline this, organize it, get it right before you start typing. The last thing in the world you want to do is start typing and then try to edit. You don't have enough time, right? Organize your thoughts about outlining what you want to say on this essay, all right? So remember, we're going to take the introduction paragraph, the paragraph number 1. That's going to be a restatement or a paraphrase of the instructions you're given. All right. So you're going to restate the prompt, whatever the sentence is. If they say that children should go to school all day long, that's what you're going to state, but you're going to rephrase it. You're going to put it in your own words so that the reader understands what you were looking at when you wrote this. All right. Be certain to state whether you agree or disagree and provide a preview of the supporting points you'll make. All right. You're going to paraphrase what they said, then you're going to include whether you agree or disagree, and just kind of give a preview. Don't get into great argument or great depth in that, but your first paragraph is just kind of an introduction to what you're doing. All right. In the middle paragraphs, this is where you set forth your points. Whatever your position is, always start off with the strongest and build on it. Then move on, but complete that thought. Don't make these paragraphs run-on paragraphs. Finish your thought, move on to the second argument. So there's a nice clean break, but a clean transition to the next paragraph. Also, don't write in circles. In other words, don't write your first paragraph, go start your second paragraph, and somewhere in there you refer back to the first. You don't do that. Keep moving forward. All right. Remember, for each point that you're going to make, you're going to include evidence or examples. As I said before, if you have to make it up so it sounds legitimate. Make it up so it sounds real. That way you'll get the points you need. All right. Be sure, as I said, start with your best argument and followed by your second best. All right. Be careful that your essays flow. Don't move back and forth. Don't write in a circle. Okay. Link the ideas so they move towards the conclusion with a clear transition to the conclusion. And then the last paragraph is where you sum it all up by addressing the instructions and tying it all together so that you have a perfect flow from start to finish. So let's break it down. Paragraph 1 is the paraphrase or the rephrasing of the issue, and you state your position. Paragraph 2, you state and elaborate on the strongest point in support of your position. Remember, your position may be negative, your position may be positive, whether you agree or disagree. It doesn't matter. That's what you're going to put your strongest point first and elaborate on it. Paragraph 3, you're going to state and elaborate on your second strongest point. Right? Now, here I have additional paragraphs, add more points as time permits. Time will not permit. You have 30 minutes from start to finish. Last thing in the world you want to do is start adding paragraphs and not be able to finish. Okay, so stick with 2 very strong points, your strongest and your second strongest. Don't even worry about the additional paragraphs. The second to last paragraph is where you address any specific tasks in the directions they give you. Okay, some prompts require you to address an opposing viewpoint or refute it, like we saw. Some will just ask you to support your position. Make sure you address that in the second to last paragraph, what's in the instructions that is important. Okay. Then, of course, in the final paragraph is where you summarize your position in a way that addresses the specific instructions you were given. So you're going to tie it all together. You want it to flow into a perfect conclusion that ties everything together. All right, moving on here. Step 4, you're going to type your essay. All right, remember that the computer program you have, the word processing program, is not like anything you've ever used. It's not a word processor in the sense of Word or Google Docs. It is basically an electronic typewriter. All right, it will allow you to type. It will allow you to indent. It will allow you to cut and paste. That's it. It will not spell check. It doesn't have Grammarly. It doesn't go through and make sure your sentence structures are correct or your spelling is correct. It doesn't do any of that for you. So don't come in there thinking you're going to get that kind of a word processor. This is simply a typewriter on a computer. Okay, so just be prepared for that. So when you type your essay, make certain that you have completed steps 1 through 3 before commencing typing. Okay, the last thing in the world you want to do is start typing and then realize that you've got to go backwards and move things around because you didn't have them the way you wanted to. Okay, so complete steps 1 and 3. It'll save time and energy in the typing process. Step 5, once you're done typing, proofread your work. You should leave yourself 2 or 3 minutes to proofread work. All right. Now, when you proofread your work at the end, you're not looking for all those fine typos and the usage of the word. What you're looking for is glaring errors, glaring mistakes, words you might have forgotten to put in there because you were either typing too fast or your mind was going too fast. Fix those quickly. Perhaps you started a sentence and didn't capitalize it, or the paragraph division kind of ran together and you can't tell that's a new paragraph starting, right? If you might have even typed the same word twice, all right? Or generalized typos, obvious grammar errors, but don't get caught up in the minor grammar errors. They don't count against you, so don't worry about them. All right, sample. Here's a sample for us. This is a prompt that's given. This is one actually taken from the GRE. Claim high school students should be graded on a pass or fail basis rather than a scaled system of letters grades A through F. Reason: it is more important to assess whether or not students have a basic command of the subjects they take than how they fare against their peers. All right. The instructions here say develop a response to the claim in which you discuss whether or not you agree with it. Right? Focus specifically on whether or not you agree with the reason upon which the claim is based. All right, so in your mind, you need to start formulating how you would handle this. Well, what would step 1 be? Remember, step 1 is to take apart the issue. So let's go ahead. All right, if we're taking the issue apart, the first step, obviously, take the issue apart. Using your scratch paper or the whiteboard provided by the GRE Testing Center, start by paraphrasing or restating the issue and the claim that it makes. All right. The claim they make is we should grade high school students as either pass or fail because we only need to know if they understand the material, while ranking them against their peers is less important. Notice, we have said everything there. We just rephrased it. We paraphrased what they said. Right? Now you consider the other side of the argument. We have to look at it from both sides. So the other side of the argument would be is we need a scaled grading system to be able to measure students against one another, as this is important for college admission. Notice we've addressed both points. It doesn't matter whether we agree or disagree with either one of those points. The point is we've taken it apart and we've analyzed it. All right. So we go to the same question again. And now we need to do step 2. Step 2 is, of course, select the point that we're going to make. What would you want to argue? Do you want to agree with them that students shouldn't have to have grades in high school, just pass or fail? Or do you believe that you need grades? So step 2 is select the point you'll make. Your job, as stated in the instructions, is to decide whether or not you agree with the statement and then to explain your position. Some would argue that the use of scaled grades is useless, as well as demoralizing for students who test poorly. Others would say that it's imperative that we use them, as their use allows colleges and universities to distinguish between applicants. Which side of the issue do you take? Keep in mind that this is less about you and your beliefs about education, and certainly more about you demonstrating that you can formulate an argument and communicate it clearly. Remember, it doesn't matter what your position is. There's no right or wrong to this, okay? It's just, can you communicate it to the reader so they understand your position? The position you choose for the issue essay does not have to be one you actually believe in. Using the outline, quickly list reasons for agreeing and reasons for disagreeing. Then choose the side for which you feel the strongest about. All right. Step 3. Well, this is step 2 continued, so let's continue with it. All right. So we go ahead and we break it down. This is arguments for the use. This is arguments against the use. All right. Arguments for the scale grades, of course, it helps colleges differentiate between applicants. It helps schools determine how far behind their peers poorly performing students are. And grades are useful if they are consistently applied, and steps can be taken to make sure they aren't subjective. Okay? But some arguments you might raise for saying that grades shouldn't be used and it should be pass and fail is grades are subjective, and therefore they're useless as an assessment. They're damaging to students' self-esteem. Okay, where pass or fail allows the school to determine if a student understands the material well enough to graduate. So we can see that there's different arguments depending on which side you take. All right. So again, the same question, but let's look at step 3 now. Okay. We decide that we're going to write this and we're against this. We don't believe in what they say. So our first paragraph we should not dispense with grading systems in favor of pass or fail. Remember, these are our notes. These are not the essay. This is just our notes we're going to build the essay off of. All right. Paragraph 2, we would put something about scaled grades are important in college admission. Notice, we've come up with the statement, we figured out the rubric. Now we're talking about they need them for college. Paragraph 3, accurate grades can help identify students who are either in need of specialized help or even advanced placement. Paragraph 4, grades are useful if they are applied consistently. And paragraph 5, the grading scale serves an important function both pedagogically and within society. So this is our breakdown. This is our outline of how we're going to handle it. Step 4, we'll type our essay. All right. Remember, open with general statements indicating that you understand the issue and then assert your position. From there, make your main point, expanding upon the notes we just made. So the next slide is going to be about an essay that's written for that particular prompt. All right. Go ahead, take your time, read this. If you need more time, go ahead and pause it and make sure you read through it, and you can get an idea of how the essay is supposed to be written. All right, as I said, if you're not done reading, go ahead and pause the video. All right, this is an actual essay that was written, and this is the score that it received. It received a perfect 6. It was outstanding according to the graders. All right. The actual score in this estimate of this essay, according to the GRE Analytical Writing section, says this essay is carefully constructed throughout, enabling the reader to move effortlessly from point to point as the writer examines the multifaceted implications of the issue. The writer begins by acknowledging arguments for the opposite side and then uses her thesis statement. However, a close examination of the issues revealed that doing so would be detrimental to students' welfare as well as to society as a large. To explain her own position on the issues, she proceeds to provide compelling reasons and examples to support the premise, and then takes the argument to an effective conclusion. The writing is clean and concise, and the grammar and usage errors minor enough not to lower the score. Sentence structure is varied, and diction and vocabulary are strong and expressive. As you notice from that essay, there was nothing about it that was overly outstanding. It wasn't overly long. It didn't use a bunch of fancy words. It was very concise, very to the point, and flowed perfectly. All right. So when we look at how scoring works, we've already talked about the fact that It's a 0 to 6 score. It's not included in your overall score. But what you need to remember is that the scoring system is more of a holistic kind of thing, and they're looking for how you blend the context, the organization, the syntaxes. Does it flow from start to finish? Do you actually make sure you cover the instructions? That's what they're looking for. All right. Now, on this page, take your time, look it through, but these are the points 6, 5, 4. The next one we'll look at 3, 2, 1, and 0. The 6 is outstanding. 5 is strong, 4 is adequate. Remember, a 4 above, you're golden, you're fine. In each one of these are the breakdowns for the criteria. You can see the differences in how they work. Go ahead and pause this, read through it, make sure you get an idea of what they're looking for as far as a point system. As you see from 3, it's limited, 2 is weak, 1 is fundamentally deficient, and 0 is unscorable. All right, in order to get a 0, it says they completely ignore the topics. It attempts to copy the task. It didn't paraphrase it. It didn't go into, and it's written in a language other than English or contains indecipherable text. So obviously we don't want to be there. All right, the next few are self-paced practice. All right, so take your time, read this passage or this sentence here, then look at the prompt, try to work it out, see where it takes you. All right, pause it so you can do that, do it on paper, whatever. Just get a feel for these. All right, this one says people who work in the arts and humanities should earn less than those who work in the sciences and economics because the benefit of arts and humanities to the population is less important than that of scientific or economic endeavors. So the instructions here are write your own response to the recommendations in which you discuss why you either agree or disagree with it. Support your response with evidence and or examples. Use a hypothetical set of circumstances, illustrate the consequences of accepting or rejecting the recommendation, and explain how this informs your thinking. So whether you agree with this statement, and if you did agree, you would agree that people who are in the arts and humanities don't deserve as much money as those in science and economics. And then you would support that. You would show why. You might come up with something like, well, the people in science and economics actually produce products that actually make money and they better society economically. So that's why they should get paid for it. But if you're opposite point of view and you believe that arts and humanities shouldn't be paid less, you might take the position that people in arts and humanities have produced things that have altered society, that have given us benefit and pleasure and privileges that we wouldn't have had if everybody was just focused on science and economics. There's a plethora of points you can make on these. None of them are right and none of them are wrong. It's just what works for you. All right. So make sure you go ahead and break this down according to the steps that we talked about earlier. The next one is educational institutions have a responsibility to dissuade students from pursuing fields of study in which they are unlikely to succeed. The instructions that go with it, of course, is develop a response to the claim in which you discuss whether or not you agree with it. Focus specifically on the most powerful or compelling example that could be used to refute your position. Notice here, they want you to take a position and then they want you to refute your own. You have to destroy your own position. So be very careful how you proceed so that you have the data and the emotion behind it to refute your position. So here I would recommend that you actually start by looking at the opposite side. So if you agree, you take the position that you disagree and then come back and refute your disagreement with all the ammunition you have for the agreement. This one says the main reason we should study history is to ensure that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past. The instructions say write a response in which you examine your own position on this statement. Explore the extent to which you either agree or disagree with it, and support your reasoning with evidence and or examples. Be sure to reflect on ways in which the statement might or might not be true and how this informs your thinking. So here you look at this and you could talk about history repeating itself, even if we study it, that it's going to inevitably repeat. Or you might take the other position that yes, things have been changed because people studied the past and now they no longer follow it. Or you could take it and make it even more minute and focus on your own life and how if you studied what mistakes your parents made, then you won't make those. Or if your children studied what mistakes you made, they won't. There's all different ways to address this. Just make sure you follow the instructions. All right, under the self-practice, here's another one, the claim. It is in the best interest of the U.S. government to cease funding National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. The reason? The cost of the federal agencies like NASA is gargantuan and returns on the investments are limited. Funding could be better allocated to dealing with pressing social problems such as homelessness and poverty. Your instructions are develop a response to the claim in which you discuss whether or not you agree with it. Focus specifically on the most powerful or compelling examples that can be used to refute your position. So again, you need to agree or disagree, and then you need to show why you might be wrong. So keep your focus on that. All right, that brings us to the end of this particular section. The next section we're going to look at is analytical writing, the content review. As always, connect at TrboTest.com.